Okay, I got 12:02. I think we've got a lot of folks here and want to respect people's time and really commit us to ending no later than 1 o'clock. So let's dive in. Good to have everybody here. Thank you again, Nick. If you could hop over to the next slide, please. I want to give everybody a very sincere and appreciative welcome. Welcome. Thank you for being here to the local section leader training for this upcoming fiscal year. My name, like I said earlier, is Phil Miller. I'm CWEA's COO. We're joined today by Brian Villacorta, who is the current State Board Treasurer, as well as Mark Takamoto, who is the incoming State Board Treasurer. We also have Nick Bailey, who is CWEA's online education manager, who's going to be behind the scenes sort of running the technical pieces of Zoom. We're very glad you're here. Thank you. We hope this is a good and productive next hour and really gives you all some of the tools and knowledge that you need as you go into leadership of your local section in the next year. Nick, if you go to the next slide, please. So likely questions will come up. This is Zoom. Hopefully most people know how to use Zoom. A few friendly reminders. If you have a question, you're welcome to type it into the chat or the Q&A field. I think you can also raise your hand. If you raise your hand, that flags for us. And Nick, you got a question, so please feel free to do that. If you're having any technical issues or something isn't working, please use the chat button and let us know what's going on, and Nick will do his best to help you out. If for any reason we reach time, we haven't answered any question, please make sure your question is in the chat. That allows us to track questions that we may not have answered. We can definitely put those answers in writing and email those out very soon thereafter. So we're sure to capture everything that you all need. Nick, go to the next slide, please. Great. And then our hope is that by the end of this hour, folks who are here will understand what local section financial policies and procedures are, get a glimpse into your role as a leader, what some of the financial reporting requirements and responsibilities are. We're going to take a look at and hope you all understand the budget and monthly reporting template, expectations around budgeting, and we're in the getting into the thick of budgeting right now. We're going to talk very briefly and hope you understand some of CWEA's compliance obligations and who the folks are that we have to answer to, the IRS, the state of California, et cetera. We're going to talk briefly, but importantly, about how to make sure you avoid being scammed. Those are pretty prevalent these days. And then where your resources and access for support are. So that's what we're trying to get through in this next hour. It's a bunch. So let's keep it going and dive in. And I'm going to pass the baton over to you, Brian. Brian, take it away.
Thank you, Phil. I want to give my appreciation to all the local section leaders who are on this call and start off by wishing everybody congratulations. You are now in charge of your respective local sections as officers and as members of the board. We don't take that for granted. We appreciate what you're doing as volunteers, and we really do respect your input and your involvement with CWEA. So to that end, we do see that local section officers have very critical roles, and our goal today is to get you the information that you need to help you guys be successful and also help CWEA with their reporting requirements. So as local section officers, we again value and see that the links between the local section and state board are facilitated through your involvement. We see that the local section officers are responsible for the planning and the mapping of annual scope of work. We see that the responsibility for planning and implementing annual budget falls on the board, but particularly it falls on the local section treasurer. So again, we're hoping to get the information to those individuals who will be doing that and continue to provide support and assistance throughout the process. And then finally, local section officers have a key role in supporting CWEA at the state board level in meeting their fiduciary responsibilities and providing the local oversight. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the major policies that we want local section treasurers to follow up on is this FP 104, and that's the local section finances. So you may or may not have been familiar with this policy, but I'm going to ask Nick Bailey to actually log on to website and show us where you could find this policy. Nick? So yeah, if you go to the About tab, click on CWA policies. And there it is right there in the FP 104 local section finances. So there's no downloading, no sign in or anything like that. You should be able to pull this policy up. And if you haven't done so yet, after this meeting, we ask that you do get familiar with that content that we're going to be presenting in the rest of this webinar. We'll touch on those elements of FP 104, but it would be important for you guys to actually have those as part of your information for local section. Thank you, Nick. Okay. To summarize the value of FP 104, broken it down into 5 major categories or pillars, if you will. And they all carry the same sort of weight. They're not in any order of any preference, but they're all important. The first item that we view is that it reduces the risk to the volunteers and to CWEA. So that while your role as a volunteer is very important, what we don't want is your role as a volunteer to become a job. Everybody has full-time jobs, and we want to make this easier. So we're hoping with the information that we present to local sections that it will reduce any risk to the volunteers and to the state board. The second pillar that we see is that it improves the ability to meet the fiduciary responsibility. The third pillar, we can ensure that we have consistent reporting from all 17 local sections and then back to the state board headquarters. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of paperwork and documentation. So to have some sort of standards in place helps keep all our ducks in a row. The fourth pillar, we conform to nonprofit IRS and California state regulations. And the fourth and fifth pillar kind of get tied in, also prepares for the fiscal year and audit. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is preserve the nonprofit status that CWA is afforded. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that we have all the reporting across all local sections for all intent purposes being inputted and processed the same way. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is intended to paraphrase some reminders about conflict of interest. We are all volunteers, and we all have some reference or experience or background with our related public agency, private firm, company, organization, etc. But as volunteers, that we do have to be careful about conflict of interest. So this first section, I'm going to read it right off the slide. While section members may be paid by the organization or as a result of work for the organization, we require the practice of proactive disclosure and independent prior approval by the board to eliminate conflicts of interest for any related party transactions as a protection of members and officers, which provides certain protection to all parties. So this can't be this cannot be under evaluated here. This is a major item here that we have to make sure that nobody is perceived or viewed in a conflict of interest. And if in doubt, please share that with your local section president, and then you guys can determine if that needs to be even assessed by the state board or anybody at the CWA office. The next item here, CWA board members and affiliated companies. Payments to CWA Corporation board members are not allowed from any financial account under CWEA's tax ID unless disclosed and approved by the CWA board. Again, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a matter that we have to be careful as volunteers that there's no payments that are being issued to those board members. For local sections, no committee officer or local section officer may contract with the same committee or local section for provision of goods or services. Again, where someone might have an expertise related to their day job or to their background, we ask that local section members and officers be very careful with how selection of goods and services are made, and if there's any connection to those individuals at the local section or at the board level. And then finally, the last item here, donations. We haven't seen this too often, but it does happen on occasion. We ask that any donations that are given to another nonprofit have an alignment with CWEA's mission. And Nick, if you go to the next slide, please. For those that aren't
Brian,
familiar,
can I cut you off for just one
Yeah.
sec? I see a hand from Tyree, and also there was a question dropped in the chat. If we could get those right now.
oh yeah, please, thank you.
Sure.
Phil.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Brian. So the one question was the same. I wanted to clarify if there was if there's a distinction between payments to members versus reimbursement. And then also I want to know if we're considering accommodations for travel under I guess compensation for services.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Terry, for that question. Phil, you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks like this was the same question that David put in the chat. Reimbursements for either travel for an event or reimbursements for going out of pocket to get like door prizes for something. Those are not the same as what we're talking about on the conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, right, would be a local section leader. Like one of the things that it prohibits, local section leader entering into a contract for goods or services with that same local section. So that's entirely different than reimbursements. I think reimbursements, you're totally in the clear. Same for a travel reimbursement, et cetera. Does that, both Tyree and David, does that answer your questions?
So that's close. With regards to the entering in a contracted services. So if we had a member, a local section member that was providing service, would that fall under the constraints of contracting within the local section? I'll just use an example. Let's say somebody's gonna do bacon wrapped hot dogs at every event, right? And there has to be some accommodation for that, some reimbursement for that. Would that constitute and there was a contractual obligation or agreement?
Yeah.
Is that would that fit into this discussion?
I got it. I'll take a first stab, and then Brian and Mark, feel free to hop in after me. The language says no committee officer or local section officer. So this is really around, people who hold decision-making authority and power at the local section level. So assuming the person who's selling these delicious bacon wrapped hot dogs, is not approving that same contract, then it's okay. It's incumbent upon the local section officers or local section leaders, to vet the contract and make sure it's appropriate, et cetera. But if the person who is selling the hot dogs is not a committee officer or local section officer, it should be okay based on the language here. Brian and Mark, feel free to piggyback off that or tell me if I'm mistaken.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Phil. I agree. I understood the same interpretation, that it was if you were a local section officer with decision-making authority, that's where we would want to make sure that transaction does not occur. But if it's a member, I don't see why that would be prohibited. But
Understood. Okay, that clarifies that.
We should probably get some clarification on that from our, I don't know if it's our auditing staff or we'll probably need to clarify that a little bit more. But I believe that's my intake of that, Terry.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with what Brian said and what Phil said. I see there's a follow-on question there about if a local section board person were to abstain. I think if you find yourself in a situation where you're not sure and there's any potential even that you might think there might be a conflict or you're not clear, please, I would just reach out and get an opinion from the board or from CWA staff to kind of help support. It much better to get clarity early rather than go into it. We did have an issue a few years ago where somebody was on the state board and contracting, and then it became a bigger issue because it kind of was allowed to proceed into the actual contract happening, and then it was kind of messy there at that point. So if you're not sure, I would please reach out for clarity or a decision from the board on whether or not it is a conflict.
Yeah, a very, very good discussion, everyone. And Stephanie, we see your question here. If buying the hot dog from family members of the board, is that allowed? So those are very good scenarios. I don't know if I have all the answers, nor or if staff has them here, but we will notate all these, and we will issue more answers to these questions once we're able to confirm and formalize it.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway that Mark shared is a good one. Like, people who make decisions cannot essentially be awarding themselves a contract. And if there's any of these scenarios that feel like they're in a gray area, like some of the stuff here, to the point already shared, talk about it with us first. Let's help you make sure that there aren't any unintentional conflicts of interest, and I think we can keep pushing forward.
Okay, so CWEA's mission statement. I'll read this one: empowering, educating, and connecting water professionals to protect public health and the environment. So the purpose of showing this slide here was to tie it back into the category of donations. And when if there's a local section, if you're looking to provide a payment to another nonprofit, we ask that it aligns as close. I'm not even going to say it aligns closely. It just needs to align with CWEA's mission statement. An example of this would be, for example, a local section wanted to make a donation to Water for People, another nonprofit organization that their mission is to provide sustainable water supply to underrepresented communities. So that would be a very, very close alignment of another organization, in contrast to maybe a school fundraiser for playground equipment, right? Again, it could be a nonprofit status entity, but doesn't really align with the mission statement for CWEA. So we ask that you be mindful for those sections that do give donations out to other nonprofit organizations. Next slide, please. Okay. Financial reporting, it's very important. I discussed that as one of our pillars as to why it's good to comply with FP 104, and the reporting is very important. So later on in this webinar, Mark is going to step through the reporting templates. If you are a new treasurer, you'll get familiar with this, and I believe that CWEA staff and Chris Consunto sent emails out earlier this week with the templates for your specific local section. So we'll be able to give you guys additional reference information to help you process that. But what I want to make sure we summarize on this is that the financial reporting is important because it protects you as the treasurer, it protects your fellow volunteers, and it protects CWEA board of directors. So we want to make sure that to the best extent possible that we have accuracy in the information that we're providing, and that the program of work is followed by what paperwork has been submitted. This is also required by auditors. It's required by our accountants when we have to file our CWEA tax return, and it's required for nonprofit standing. So while you may feel that your local section may or may not have a large part in what we do with state reporting, it actually has a big part in what we do in order to make compliance. And so therefore, we want to make sure you guys all understand how important that is. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions. I think there was a question that came in on the chat here. Oh, just a friendly reminder, this webinar is being recorded. Okay, next slide. Okay, hearing no questions, I will turn over the stage to Mark.
I think I'm going to
sorry.
take the next couple slides, but
Okay.
I see another hand from Tyree.
Yeah.
If you wanna
Sorry,
go ahead.
you moved on too fast for me, Brian. I can only I got the 2-finger typing magic, so
Sorry, Tyree.
that's okay. That's okay. I just wanted to ask, as far as the budget template goes, I'm sort of viewing it as a really kind of a planning document. What I'm wondering is, are there any tools available to local sections for either monthly or quarterly, like tracking? I know we get the expense reports that come from the association, but it's kind of cumbersome sometimes trying to, roll that down, if you will, into the different line item sections. So I'm just wondering, is there something that exists already, either at the board level or the association has, that the local sections can use to sort of have ongoing tracking?
Yeah, so Tyree, I don't know what local section you're with, but depending on which one you are, CWA, and we'll get into this, CWA offers a service that they can help track information for you. If your local section chooses not to opt into that program, then there's not, I don't believe that we have any other service or publications offered to kind of help track that on a quarterly or monthly basis. But Phil, did you want to add anything in, or we let the presentation roll through and then we hopefully will answer that question for Tyree?
I think we should try to get to the budgeting soon. And I think that Tyree, if at the end of this, if something still isn't clear or you need support, just reach out to me and Chris Consunta, who's on this call, who's our staff accountant. We're more than happy to get on a call with you and see if there's any resources or anything else that we can help provide.
Sounds good.
I see a
let's
hand up
do
from Cody Duncan too,
yeah.
so I'm just Cody.
Hey, Brian, I just have a quick question. What time of the year does the budget need to be approved? And once approved, what's the next steps to amending it if necessary, or is it even allowed to do that? Thanks.
Thanks, Cody. I think we'll answer that question here in the next set of slides. The deadline is coming up in April, and the information about amendments and changes can be addressed. I think we'll get those answers here in a few minutes here. So.
Cool. Yeah, let's keep pushing through. We're hearing a lot of budget questions. I want to make sure we give some decent time for that. So I'm going to take us through the next few slides and do this pretty quickly. Just a few little call outs from FP 104. Each section gets one bank account per section. These bank accounts are all with Wells Fargo, and each section has its own distinct bank account, so they're not all merged together. We can get people online access to bank accounts, which is a really handy tool, so you can always sort of have real-time access and check in on the status of funds, money coming in, money going out. If people want to request a debit card at the local section level, that is something that we can do, and reach out to myself and Chris, and we can work with our contact at Wells Fargo to make that happen. We can accept payments via credit card, and Wells Fargo sort of has their preferred medium, which is Clover. So again, if you're trying to run any event that you're going to expect revenue from and you want to accept credit cards, please work with us. Let us know. We can help facilitate that and get it set up. Next slide, please. On payables, anything over $500 requires 2 signatures justifying a payable. Anything that we pay, of course, has to be mission aligned. We have to be able to say why we paid this money and why it relates to CWA's mission. Documentation, it is important on any expenses that, of course, it shouldn't be news to anybody or surprising, but any dollar spent, we need to be able to substantiate with a receipt. Again, I think this is pretty standard stuff. And then validation, if you're hosting an event, there's a couple things I want to share here. If you're doing door prizes, we do need to receive the list of what the door prizes were and who won them. Again, that's an audit and compliance box that we need to check. And then if you have an event like a dinner or anything like that, we do need to see a list of everybody who attended. And those are things that local sections have historically been very good about sending in to us. So thank you in the past for having done that, and thank you in advance in the future for continuing to do that. I see a comment from Eric. Eric, if you're having Clover issues, please do offline reach out to Chris and I, and we'll see what we can do to get that resolved or support you to get that resolved. Nick, if you go to the next slide, thank you. Just a few other call outs here. Any contract needs to get over to us so we can hold it. This is a real audit one. Auditors always want to see copies of any contracts that we may have entered into. Local sections cannot take on any debt. Local sections do need to share with the main CWEA office a list of assets, right? Laptops, projectors, etc. If there's any material assets that local sections are holding. There can be a maximum of 2 signatory section bank account. And then, local sections and CWA in general, we do need to track people who should be on a 1099. So a 1099 is an independent contractor. So anybody who gets paid $600 a year or more who is not a corporation, they do need to be on a 1099. We need to collect a W-9 from them. If you have any questions about this, again, reach out to us. It can get a little bit murky sometimes, like who is a 1099, who's not, who's a corporation, who isn't. When in doubt, reach out. We can help you answer that. And these are just this part of the lay of the land of money going out the door. I think now, yeah, we're getting into the budgeting part. I'll try to
Phil, there was a
respond.
question in the chat on the amount that 2 signatures are needed on.
Does this mean that checks written out over $500 need 2 signatures? I believe the answer to that is yes. Chris, put you on the spot for a minute. Chris, is there anything you want to share or add related to this? Chris tends to be the one who's sort of on a day-to-day basis tracking and dealing with payables.
So for in-house local sections, we usually make sure that all check disbursements would require 2 signatures if they are over 500. For other in-house, for those that are not supervised or processed through CWEA, I noticed that most of the local sections they do not follow the policy on payments requiring 2 signatures. So that's one thing we have to address in the future.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And Chris, would you also agree that when we're issuing a check, from when we do the accounting, that we are requiring two either signatures or approvals? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great.
Phil, if I may, just, I asked the question, I just want to do a follow-up. Is it, Chris, you mentioned 2 signatures. I just want clarity. Is it 2 signatures on the check request form that, precedes a check being written out, or is it?
No, if the local section issues their own check payments, then you are required to, the checks are required to be signed by 2 people.
2 people. Okay, so 2 people on the board, I'm assuming president or, secretary, treasurer is one of them, and the other one is somebody else on the board.
Usually the authorized signatory to the account, which is, it's either the president, the president is the other person aside from the treasurer.
Okay, got it.
Great. Yeah, for signing a check, it can only be people who are authorized to sign for the account with the bank. I'll try to answer one other question that I see here in the chat quickly. If we miss anything, again, we can follow up offline. Stephanie, I'm not sure. I think the answer is it depends. My guess is typically photographers for events are often independent contractors. They're likely not a corporation, so they're likely to be on a 1099, and we should get a W-9 from them. And feel free to get with me offline and we can dig in and actually figure that out for sure one way or another.
Is a 1099 required for door prizes? I mean, if a person is buying door prizes and getting reimbursed, will that be considered?
No, if you're going out of pocket to reimburse a door prize, that does not require 1099.
That's good.
Mark, I'll sort of, while you're going, Mark, I'll track the chat and see if there's anything that we missed, and I can manage the chat. I do want to make sure we give some good time to budgeting. So Mark, why don't you go ahead and lead us forward?
Okay, and I'll try to move pretty quickly here. We are probably going to be short on time if we don't speed up a little bit. So yeah, we talked a lot about the fiscal policy 104, and those are specific requirements that you have to comply with. You have to do those things. You have to comply with that policy. But that leaves a lot of gray area in terms of how do you budget? What do you put in the budget? How do you think about the budget? So we developed some guidelines here to offer to local sections when they put together your budget. You can look at these guidelines to help inform you or give you some ideas of how to plan and what to plan for. So one is equality. Try to think about who is in your section and who you're serving, and try to plan your budget to serve all those members equally. Now, I think we understand that no one event can serve everybody equally, but just as a broad program of work, please try and think about that. Try and put your funds back into your section and towards the goal of the organization. So when you think about where you're spending money, think about that. Also, we want as guidance local sections to think about in your checking account balance. Try to maintain around 50% of your annual budget in your bank account. So, like, for example, if your annual budget was $100,000, you should have at least $50,000 in your bank account. So we don't want sections to create a huge stockpile of money in their bank account that just sits there. We also don't want them to be too low that they can't fund their program of work. When you do your plan, try to prioritize education, networking, and support. Those are our main focus areas as an organization. So if you can focus on those core goals, that would be great. Obviously, it helps to have a plan rather than kind of coming up with things as you go along throughout the year, and we'll go into this a little bit later. But it's good to plan out your year and how you're going to budget for it and what kind of events you're going to hold. And then this kind of covers everything, but be purposeful. Again, don't just kind of randomly pick things. Think about what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are for the year, and develop your plan according to that. Next slide, please. So let's get into the budgeting template. As Brian mentioned earlier, that was sent out earlier this week. And so you should have a copy of this. I'm going to some deadlines here shortly, but a new item in the budgeting template for this year is this program of work. And this is a tool to help you plan your year out. So what you can do here is start thinking about the events that your section is going to hold, start entering some details about it in terms of what it is, what kind of category it falls under, costs, income, etc. And you can start mapping out how your program of work will look through the year. And this is kind of the baseline that you'll use to help build your budget from. So this should be pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, please reach out on how to fill this out. And then if you are just curious as to what to put in there, you can always look at your prior year budget. So that's also a tab in the template that was sent out. So you can see what your budget was from last year. Doesn't mean you have to copy that exactly. You can always deviate from that. So you can think about what went well, what didn't go well, what are some areas you might want to spend some more budget on next year, and use that as another tool to help fill in your program of work and your budget for next year. And so as you look at both those documents, the program of work and your prior year budget, you could start filling in your main budget document tab. And here's where you're going to enter your information about each event. Please try and put your events or your programs into one of the categories listed at the top. Also, there's different categories along the rows there for revenue and expense. Please try and use those. We'd like to encourage folks to not use the miscellaneous items too much. Those are for really, really minor things, miscellaneous things. So it's good to have detail, good to have clarity as to exactly what your budget's being spent for. That way you can track that as you go out throughout the year. Next. All right, deadlines. So those of you with eagle eyes, don't look at the date in the back of the spreadsheet that's highlighted. Look at the big orange circle in the middle there. It's April 13th. That's when we would like to see the budgets. This rolls into CWEA organization budgeting, where that budget has to be done by the beginning of the next fiscal year, which is July. So we need to get all of the budgets in hand, rolled up into an overall organizational budget before July. So in June, we're going to approve that. And we need time for our board to review it and to approve that budget as well. So that's kind of why we're pushing for it now. If you have an issue with that deadline, please reach out. We can work with you on where you're at and when you can turn that budget in. But ideally, if you could get it to us by April 13th, that would be appreciated. Next slide. Okay, so we'll move on to standard monthly reporting. So once you have your annual budget, there is a monthly report. I think this maybe helps address Tyree's question. There's a monthly report that you fill out if you're doing your own local section treasurer accounting. It has the revenue category similar to the annual budget and your expense. So this is kind of your way of filling in the budget as you go along and tracking how you're spending each month, so you can see how you're doing with your budget. So a very similar layout as the annual budget, but this is filled in on a monthly basis. Next slide. And so if you're doing this if you're doing your own accounting or treasury activities, you're not having the state do that for you, then you would be doing this as your local section. You would be filling in this monthly reporting template, including the revenue expenses, and you should be using your bank account to do that. So for each month, you would look at your bank account to see what activities took place. You'd be putting those activities into the template, and at the end, all those activities should match up to what your bank account statement says is there. Now, if you have the state do this, then we're handling it, and you don't have to worry about trying to make all the numbers match up. There may be some questions that come to you in terms of what happened, but it's a lot easier if you have the state running your accounting for you rather than doing it yourself. Okay, next slide. So I think this is on to Phil, correct?
Yeah, before we go there, Mark, there was
Yeah.
a question for you in the chat. If you could tackle that.
Sure. The question is, on monthly dinner meetings and other training events, are trying to be even or slightly negative on cash flow. Cost of food, beverage for meetings and events has increased, and we are considering increasing the registration fees to compensate the increase. That is a great question. I know a lot of local sections are struggling with this. Dinner meeting and food and beverage costs have gone up quite a bit. There's no guidance there about your event, whether or not it breaks even or not. I think it's very difficult to make it break even because the event fees would be very high. I think you just need to consider that as part of your overall budget. And maybe you take a loss on certain events and you make a lot of money on other events, but as a net, you're kind of breaking even, or maybe you're spending a little extra because you have a high bank account balance and you're trying to use some of that money towards the mission. So it's not necessarily event-based, but think about that as a whole across your local section calendar of events and your plan for the year. The second question here, where can we find how much income we are getting from membership dues? That's pretty easy. The local section dues are $12 per member. So every member that signs up for CWEA, they pick a section, and they can often pick, or they can, if they want to, pick a second section. But as the primary section, you get $12 from their CWEA registration. So every member that you have as a member of your section, that local section receives $12. All right.
Great. And there's
Mark, just to clarify, are the local section revenues generated monthly or like annually? How does that work?
I don't know if Phil, the answer to that, but I believe they come in as the members renew their membership. So once they renew, when that occurs, that money comes into you.
There should be, Chris, please tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but there should be monthly disbursements. I think once a month after we reconcile new membership, right? We get X amount of new members in a month for all of CWEA. We have to see who is in which local section, and then that will determine on a monthly basis where dollars are sent to specific local sections.
Yes, Mark is correct. Whenever a member renews the membership, a part of it goes to the local section.
There's a question. How do we find who is current on their membership? I don't know if we can. I know the state can definitely look at that. I don't know if local sections have access as to who is or is not a member. I know you can pull down from the website your local section membership list, and you can find out who is a member. I don't know if you can see who is no longer a member. Maybe there is a grace period there where they still show up. There used to be. I'm not sure what the current database shows.
I don't think they're on this call, but member services, the folks in the staff associated with member services can also put that information together for local sections. The request just has to be made, and depending on time, what their workflow is, they should typically get that out to you within the following, couple of days. So
yeah. There are a few questions in the Q&A that I'll tackle now, and then I'll go on the next couple of slides. I'll take them in a random order. They're from Tyree. Tyree, the answer to your question about how much CWA accounting services cost, that's an easy one. The answer is zero. When we take local sections in-house, there is no charge. It's really kind of an economies of scale thing where we have the right systems and infrastructure in place in-house to do it. We certainly do not charge anyone. And what we found is that when we take it in-house, and we'll talk about this a little bit, it should be a value add for both sides. I think on our end, it helps us streamline things from the accounting and administrative side. And from the local section side, the hope is that it frees people up at the local section level to not be masquerading as accountants and rather do the work that they actually want to do at the local section level. There's another question, minimum cost value for inventorying items. I'm going to follow up with this offline. I want to get you a good number. No, we do not want you inventorying paper clips, right? There should be a threshold, and let us follow up with you offline and get that to you. And then I'd love for either Mark or Brian to take this. The final question was, what's the procedure for the state board approval of local section budgets? And then how is that communicated to local sections?
I can answer that one. So once you submit your local section budget, I think CWA staff review it just to kind of see that it's complete and that you don't have any questions. From there, if it goes to a subcommittee of the board called the Operations Committee for review and approval. So typically we would review all those at once. We, bring forward all 17 local section budgets, note any anomalies or special circumstances, and we would discuss that on the Ops Committee. And then the Ops Committee would make a recommendation to the board to approve those budgets once all the concerns have been addressed. And then again, that goes to the state level board for approval during the board meeting in June.
Great,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Phil, for taking those questions. Just one follow up on the budget process. How would you recommend we address budget amendments?
Yeah, I think those are typically brought forward as needed. So if your local section found that you wanted to make a change to your budget, I think your local section board would make a motion to amend it, and then that would go to the state staff and then come before the Ops Committee for review and approval, similar to the process for the annual budget, but it should be a one-off change or amendment to the budget rather than the whole thing.
So Tyree, what you also should, all local sections have a liaison that's assigned that could help to assist on these matters. And I've seen that happen where a local section had to make an amendment. They then work with their liaison to the board to push that in front of the CWA staff, and then that ultimately went in front of the Ops Committee for approval. That's a good resource to utilize in order to get your information up on the radar for these sort of changes.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Brian. Let me keep pushing us forward. The next couple slides, there's some reporting responsibilities that all local sections have. This is check requests. So if there's a request to have dollars go out, that the CWA state office is going to be sending the dollars out, we need a completed check request form. Again, Chris and I have seen that folks are pretty good about this. This has some basic questions that help us keep the accounting in good shape, and also places where people can give their signatures and approvals. And then on the other side, if a local section is making a deposit, there are just some simple data points that we need, again, so that we can keep the accounting in order and understand how to allocate revenue or what the revenue was for. Nick, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is specific to treasurers. There's a fair amount of reporting responsibilities for treasurers. As we mentioned, the big one coming up is the budget. So it's to get a budget submitted. The due date is April 13th. If there's any real issues you're tracking with that, please do let us know. Otherwise, we hope people can meet that. There's monthly financial reporting. You can see there's a bulleted list here. I'm not going to go through everything here. People can read. You don't need me to read to you. But what I will share is in a few slides, there's a table we're going to show, which shows the sort of in-house versus not accounting. So if a local section has turned their accounting over to us, which items go away and which items do we take care of versus the full list if a local section decides to do their own accounting. And then finally, bank statement reconciliation is also part of the reporting responsibilities if folks are doing it in-house. Let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. Just a friendly reminder that, CWEA, even though we have 17 local sections, we are just one organization. We have one federal, the FEIN, this number that starts with 95. We have folks we report to, the IRS, the state of California's Attorney General Office. And it's just a reminder that the activities at the local section level do all feed into us as one overall larger nonprofit organization. And that's really, again, why we're having this call, making sure people understand, get at least a glimpse of the compliance, the pieces of compliance that we're responsible to and have to work towards at any given moment. Any quick questions that have come up? Okay, if it comes up later, please, of course, do what you've been doing, put it in the chat or the Q&A or raise your hand. And otherwise, I think it's back to you, Mark.
Yeah, and again, I'll try to move quickly. This is all one big plug for local sections to move to the state level treasurer service. So keep that in mind. So I'll move pretty quickly here. Right now, we have 10 local sections that are taking advantage of CWEA's bookkeeping services. As we mentioned, this helps reduce the administrative burden. It helps eliminate reporting compliance issues. We can help with the check runs for you, and it just makes your life easier. Again, where you're not, like, most likely not an accountant in your day job. Some of our members are, but most of them are not. And so we want to help lighten the load on our volunteers here by taking this on. Next slide. And so here is a comparison of what you have to do as a local section if you are with the bookkeeping service by CWEA or without it if you're doing that yourself. You can see the list is pretty long, and towards the bottom now you see all the things that you don't have to do, and a lot of them are pretty tedious, honestly. So, invoices and receipts and filing and check request, images, looking at your bank statements every month. So, and one thing I want to point out very clearly is that as a local section, you still control the budget. If you're with the bookkeeping service with CWEA, it's still your money. You still control it. We're just helping lift some of these really administrative and accounting burdens that you might have to deal with, which, again, I don't think anybody signed up to do check requests or ledger sheets for your local section. We're here to serve the mission, and that's part of it, but that's not really why most of us signed up to be volunteers. So next slide, please. So there are a couple different avenues for you to get to state level bookkeeping support. Obviously, the easiest one is for you to opt in. However, if a local section is running late, up to 3 months late, then the state may force you to go into bookkeeping support through the state, because as we've all mentioned here, it does affect our overall organization if you're not timely with your reporting. So we may force you to do that. And then also, if there's a trend of maybe every other month, there's a certain requirement, but if you have a pattern of lateness, we may also ask you to move to the bookkeeping support from the state as well. Next slide. And so if you do decide to opt in, that's pretty easy. It can be coordinated between your section and our staff, and it doesn't require the state level board of directors or our ops committee to approve that. It's just a decision made by your local section, and we can work with staff after that decision's been made to move you over to our bookkeeping. Next slide. Now, if for some reason you move over to the state bookkeeping and then you find that you're not satisfied or doesn't meet your needs, after 2 years, you can opt out. So if you can try it, and if it doesn't work for you for whatever reason, you can opt out or request to opt out. The ops committee would review that decision, and then if you didn't like the outcome of that, you can appeal to the executive committee of the board to take another look at that. But you do have an opt out if, again, you don't like how it's going with your bookkeeping. Next slide. And again, just to reinforce, since it's so critical, having timely local section budget information is very important. The longer you wait, the increases the chance that documents get lost, nobody submits the receipt, and it just makes it harder for everybody else to catch up once you're behind. That includes our staff's time, other volunteers' time. So please be considerate when you think about this, and do get your local section budgets in on time for the annual budget and on a monthly basis. So it's just want to just reinforce how important that is to you to do that. Next slide. All right, I think I'll hand this one back over to Phil. I think maybe there's a question here.
Yeah, I can answer Eric's question, and then again, Chris, feel free to add on if there's anything I'm missing. When the state office takes on bookkeeping, we're not involved in the approving of purchases or reimbursements. We're really involved in the implementing or the executing of it. You know, we review to make sure that the right approvals are there. And there have been times where we get something and it's missing an approval, or something is off, or a number is incorrect. And Chris will follow back up with the local section, either ask for clarification or say, hey, friendly reminder, we do need, we need this approval, but it's not, if the approvals are there at the local section level, we're not overriding or anything. We're just checking for compliance and then executing. Chris, that sound right? Anything to add?
That's correct. That sounds perfect.
And Chris, correct to Stephanie's question that even when the state is running bookkeeping, that local sections have their debit cards. Is that right?
That's correct.
Great. Thank you so much. Great. Let me take us, we're pretty close to the end. We're doing really good on time. This is a new element compared to prior years. And actually, let me pause for one sec before I go into a couple slides on scams. He's behind the scenes, he's off camera, but I want to give just a moment of gratitude and thanks to Chris. Chris is the one who's really interfacing and interacting with all the local sections, especially the local sections that have turned bookkeeping services over to us. He does a really tremendous job of it. And so thank you to everyone on this call who's sort of giving Chris the info that he needs. And Chris, just a moment to say thanks for all you do for local sections. It's much appreciated. Switching gears to scams. So we've seen more stuff recently and more activity around scams and attempted scams. And so we wanted to incorporate into this training to give, this is not a deep dive on how to not get scammed, but hopefully we want to give people just a few really important morsels or pieces of information to make sure that we're really reducing and hopefully eliminating the chances of folks at the local section level being scammed. So there are 5 signs of a scam that we want to just remind you of. You likely already know this, or if not, hopefully this is helpful. People who are trying to scam will often pretend to be somebody from the org you know. So you'll get something saying, hey, it's me, Brian. Hopefully you can look at the email address and it's like a million alphanumeric things at Outlook or something. It's not actually Brian, right? But they'll pretend to be somebody from the organization, and to go further, they'll pretend to be somebody from a significant role. So they might pretend to be the state treasurer or the state president, or Jen, our ED CEO, or they might pretend to be me. They'll say there's a problem or a prize, right? They'll say, hey, there's this really urgent thing I need your help on, or oh my God, there's some reward at the end of this. Number 3 is very common. They put a lot of pressure to act quickly. So say, hey, there's a problem. I really need this from you in the next hour or the next 2 hours. It's urgent. They will tell you to pay in a specific way. We've likely seen this a lot in our lives. There's an important problem and we're going to solve it with an iTunes gift card. I need you to go out and get me a bunch of iTunes gift cards, or that kind of stuff. And then number 5, they'll also say that you can't follow up with them. I need you to get me these iTunes gift cards, and I'm sorry, I'm in meetings the rest of the day. You can't reach me. So either all of these together, or at least some of them present, are very likely the signs of a scam. Nick, if you can go to the next slide, please. We want to give a friendly and very important reminder that either from volunteers, so board members, or people who work for CWEA, we are never going to reach out to you and ask you to purchase things for us or pay vendors for us. We're never going to ask you to get gift cards for us. So if you ever get any one of these requests, this should be an immediate trigger and warning that there's a scam going on or a potential scam. And the ask of folks here, you know, is really to just like slow down in the moment. If anything is giving you even the remotest inkling that something might be wrong or could be wrong, the easiest thing to do is just slow down, pause, and please call us. You know, if you pick up the phone, hey, Phil, I got an email from you, or hey, Brian, I got an email from you saying this, is this legit? That's by far the easiest way for us to let you know, you know, no, this is not legit. This is a scam. Please ignore it. Often when we see scams that are successful, it's because people are moving fast and they don't take a moment to sort of pause and confirm. And then that's where they'll happen. So yeah, Catherine puts it in here. It's happened to a lot of people. So please know we have systems and structures in place to avoid these, and that one of the responsibilities that is on your side of the ledger is tracking, making sure if you see these requests, you're sort of cross-referencing this list and ensuring that it does not look like a scam. Again, if there's no other takeaway, please just slow down and call us. If anything feels off or if you're unsure, we can always confirm that for you. And then we're right at the end. We've done really nicely on time. We're at 12:57. We may have time for a couple questions at the end, but we just want to wrap up and let you know there's a lot of people here to support. Again, to echo the gratitude that Brian shared at the start, thank you for taking on this leadership and work over the next year. It's a lot, and we really want to be here as a resource to you and make it as easy as possible. So you can reach out to Brian, you can reach out to Mark, you can reach out to myself, you can reach out to Chris, and you also have a dedicated liaison at each local section. Brian or Mark, anything else you want to add before we get into questions?
There was a lot of information that we shared in this hour, but that's again by no means the be all. We have opportunities after this meeting and phone call and emails to help. So please help. Let us help you if you have any other questions. That's what our role is here with the organization. And thank you for your time and attention.
Yeah, so I think we got a couple minutes. I think we're happy to stay on the line. If anyone has a question, feel free to ask. We can answer it. To Nikki's question, Nikki, we will email out the link to the recording probably early next week, so hopefully Monday or Tuesday, and that will be sent to everybody. If people want to hang and ask questions, please stay. Otherwise, people are more than welcome to drop off. We hope this hour was beneficial and hope everyone has a really wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Hey,
All right.
just a quick question, Phil, on the scamming part of it. This seems to specifically affect volunteer leadership. I don't know if this is like, you know, the scam emails or kind of a membership wide issue. What I'm wondering is CWEA nimble enough to be able to send out advisement? So like if I get a funny email, determine that it's bogus, and is there a way to, you know, reach out to Alec or somebody else in the association to get a quick email blast out to let membership know that you know, that this thing is occurring?
I mean, I think we can do that. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. I'll say one thing that gives me pause, unfortunately, is just they're so common and this stuff happens a lot that we might be just slamming people's inboxes if we did that every time.
Understood. Yeah.
Hey, Phil, if you don't mind me jumping in. Yeah, what you said is correct. Like, it happens so often, the inbox will get crazy, but CWA will be sending out semi-regular emails, just reminding people to be on the lookout, and also sometimes informing like what the newest scam trend is. So just be on the lookout for that to be something that's going to start happening. And then we'll have a standard page that people can always just reference with those, like how to spot a scam tips or government resources to report people trying scams.
That was great. Thank you for adding that, Sela.
And I did have a question, and maybe this would be better served offline, but I do have a question about how local section leadership can prevent incurring additional liability for CWEA, what kind of enforcement mechanisms are available to us, and then how we should handle those things once they occur. I could probably give a specific incident, maybe like offline. That might be a longer conversation, but that is something that we did want to see if we can address.
Yeah, I think, Tyree, if you have a specific incident, I think your instinct is right that let's schedule a time to talk offline. And I think that's probably best. I think, generally local sections are covered under, under the business insurance and different lines that we carry. And I think if there's a theme or a specific concern, please do reach out. Let's schedule something, and I'd love to hear more and figure out what we can do.
It will do.
I think the key, Tyree, is as volunteers, we are trying to do our best and we try to conduct our due diligence, but whenever in doubt, we just default to notify somebody at the staff level, or somebody, your liaison board member, somebody to help to address and just determine if it's a non-issue, or determine that there's a corrective course of action necessary. But just, I guess, if in doubt, just pass it up, and we'll do what we can to support and assist the situation for the local section.
We're a little bit over time. I think we can maybe, Yvonne has a question that let's get, and then maybe after that we can wrap up, give people their afternoons back. And then again, the offers out to anyone who's still left on this call. Reach out to us if there's any questions that are still lingering after this, and we're more than happy to help you out. Yvonne's question is, when you get the debit card, what are the approval requirements for each person? Chris, I'd love you to take this, please, if you can give some clarity to Yvonne.
For Yvonne, I just confirmed with the bank that it's already processed and you will be receiving it in 5 days.
And can you share, Chris, also, once they have the debit card, are there approval requirements for use or for purchases?
Yes, those people using a debit card, they always forget to process a check request form to support the debit charges. So for future or current treasurers, you are required to submit a check request form for every transactions you made on the debit card.
Chris, this is Yvonne.
Hi.
Hi. Do you suggest to get the approval before the purchase, or is it just purchase form, make sure your bases are all covered?
Either way, as long as it's supported by a signature and receipt for the purchase.
And is there a monetary value limit? Is there a value that's not allowed on that debit card?
So the same with the check. If it's over 500, the two authorized signatories should approve the purchase.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Yvonne, for the question. And yeah, I think we can probably wrap up now. Like we shared, we will email out the link to this as a resource for if folks want to re-listen. It was that exciting, great, you'll have it. Also, obviously, for folks who weren't able to make it, that'll be a resource there as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for making the time, for being here. Please do reach out. Don't hesitate. We're here to support. And we look forward to hearing from you, and good luck budgeting. We're looking forward to seeing them. Thank you so much.